Hello friends, and happy holidays to you all. I know we all have different circumstances, but I truly hope you are all making the best of things and staying as warm and comfortable as you can in this cold, dark season. Me, I spend Christmas alone when I'm in Japan. No, don't feel bad for me. I'm especially fond of my own company, and I get a couple of hours to chat over the internet with my family in the evening. I'm also something of a great cook, thanks in no small part to my mother, and some of my friends over here actually. I was out with friends before the big day, and I'll be meeting others after and around the new year, which I'm spending in Tokyo this year by the way. So don't think for a second that I had a bad time. Quite the opposite in fact. And well, you guys are to thank for that. No, really. You see, when it comes to my day job, I more or less live paycheck to paycheck. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of life as an English teacher in Japan here, as there are many better channels who've handled that stuff. The fact is, I read my contract before I signed it, so I knew what I was getting myself in for ahead of time. And the biggest reason I still do this, despite it being something of a career dead end, is that I really enjoy it. But while I have a nice enough apartment and food on my plate every day, I don't have a lot left over at the end of the month. Not to worry though. I've landed a side hustle with a remote teaching position that I can do in the evenings starting in January. So I'm going to be just fine long term. However, when it comes to luxuries like trips and video games, well, I wouldn't be able to do much if I hadn't been given the opportunity to monetize my main hobby a couple of years ago. I'm not a massive channel by any stretch, but a few of my videos have broken free of the YouTube slot pile, and I've had a small but steady income coming in every month as a result of that. An income that I took away for most of the year, and then cut loose with when it's time to take a trip, or treat myself for Christmas. So let me open by saying thank you to all of you. To all of you who click my videos, watch my content, engage with it, and help it get noticed. And especially to the couple of people who've become patrons and channel members, and even the few super thanks I've received this year. You have no idea how humbling it is for me that you would choose to part with any amount of your hard-earned money just to say thank you for a video that you are very welcome to watch for free. All of you make my hobby a lot more rewarding, and you're not only making my life a little more comfortable, but also allowing me to share a bit of my good fortune among my friends as well via gifting them games on Steam. So, on to the main point of the video. The video editing is going to be a little more raw this time, mainly because I don't have complete playthroughs of these games to chop up and stitch together, and also just to make the turnaround on this one a little faster. So I always have a big 3 for Christmas. I put off getting the games that I'm most excited for in a year until Christmas Day because that's how it worked when I was a kid who didn't have his own money and had to wait until Christmases or birthdays to get his games. And I am, if nothing else, a sentimental old fool who likes to have something to look forward to on his Christmas Day. See? Here's my advent calendar. I usually get one big AAA game, one indie game, and then go rooting through GOG for something with serious nostalgia to enjoy. 2 years ago, that was Gun. Last year, it was Project Eden. And this year, I went a little crazy and got not only the entire classic RE collection, but also both Dino Crisis games and Cold Fear. There were no AAA games that interested me this year, but of course you know, a big RPG guy like me, who loves AA passion projects that are punching way above their weight class, was gonna get Clair obscure. And my indie game of choice this year was Shinobi Art of Vengeance. So these are my big 3 for 2025. But first, I bought Project Eden as part of my Christmas 2024 haul, and literally only played it for a few hours on Christmas Day. Most of my time that day got eaten up by Octopath Traveler and Final Fantasy VII Remake. However, I decided to use my December reprieve from playing games for content to really dig into this PlayStation 2 classic again, and it is way better than I remember it being. The mistake a lot of people might make when playing or watching a playthrough of this is seeing the guns and assuming this is some kind of third-person shooter, and the combat being total ass is one of the things that stuck in my memory the most. However, This is actually an environmental puzzle game. It was developed by Core Design, yes, the same guys who made the OG Tomb Raider games, and it was level designer Heather Gibson's first role in the director's chair, and the last game she worked on before bowing out of the industry to raise a family. The game has a wonderful and charming sci-fi aesthetic, and since this isn't any kind of remaster, we're dealing with all the same low-resolution textures that we got back in the day. The setting is a towering, futuristic megacity. Basically, every time the air becomes too polluted to live comfortably, the city limits are just extended higher and higher into the sky, where the air is clearer. Which, believe it or not, is not the most bonkers idea in this game. We play a team of 3 people and 1 android who work for the Urban Protection Agency, or UPA. Basically, law enforcement, specifically for people who choose to live within the city limits. What starts as an operation to quell a gang attack on the Real Meat Factory,
I suppose you've all heard of Real Meat.
Oh yeah, I could show you a...
soon sees our team chasing kidnapped technicians far below the city limits, all the way down to the surface of the Earth, and even into an underground bunker, as they fight gang members and strange mutant abominations to try and rescue these workers, and uncover the mystery of what the hell is happening down here. You can switch between the 4 members at any time, and each has a unique ability that can be used to overcome certain obstacles. Commander Carter, for example, has the highest level security clearance, meaning he's the one you need to get through the UPA locked doors, while Amber can't be hurt by environmental hazards such as gas, electricity, or fire. Amber is also the heaviest hitter in combat thanks to their rockets. Minoko is the team's hacker. You'll need her to access security terminals, open doors, and even take over turrets, while Andre is the repairman. Both of these characters have little minigames that you have to play to use their skills. When you're controlling one character, the other 3 will be controlled by the game's AI. You have to push a key to get them to all follow you, and while the pathfinding is mostly okay, you'll have plenty of moments where you'll realize someone isn't with you, so you'll switch over to controlling them and find them way further back down the map. It is actually possible to play this game multiplayer with up to 4 people. Back on the PS2, this was a kind of couch co-op game, but it doesn't really work because the puzzles don't require everyone to work together. Rather, one person is taking care of whatever the current problem is, while the others are waiting around for them to finish. And it's only when enemies show up that we really need all hands on deck. Unfortunately, as already stated, the combat is just straight up bad. Controls in this area feel clunky, enemies are spongy, and their AI is just terrible. Fights will often degenerate into battles of attrition, as you simply stay put, place your crosshair on a target, and hold down the fire button until one of you is out of health. This makes some of the later levels a lot less fun and a lot more of a grind, as while the environmental puzzles remain consistently high quality, there are a lot more enemies in those later levels, and it's a slog to deal with them. Rage-quittingly so, actually. The game's strong point is absolutely its winding environments that keep doubling back on themselves. They basically do the Dark Souls thing, or maybe Dark Souls is doing the Project Eden thing, of having you go the long way around an area to unlock a shortcut back to your spawn point. Spawn point, you say? Yes. This game doesn't have any kind of true fail state. Since all members of the team are needed to reach the endgame, death is a minor inconvenience at best. Characters who die are zapped off back to a regeneration point to have their bodies reconstructed and their health restored. You also need to manage your weapon energy. This is generally handled at recharge points, but you will have a limited stock of power cells that you can use in a pinch. Anyway, I think that's enough of an overview. The pros are the levels. They present really interesting puzzles that are so satisfying to solve, and you can really tell that these are the guys who made the original Tomb Raiders because of it. While the combat is pretty bad, meaning you can really tell that these are the guys who made the original Tomb Raiders. I am tempted to give this one the full treatment one day, as it's an interesting artifact of its time, and for better or worse, it really is one of a kind.
Is anyone there?
You don't belong here. Should have stayed where it's warm. Like little sparrow.
Hollow Body was another of my Christmas purchases from last year that I finally got around to finishing in the weeks leading up to the big day this year. Fans of indie survival horror ate very well in 2024, thanks to the long-awaited rivals of this, Crow Country, and Conscript. Now before I get into any criticism here, I want to say that I did enjoy Hollow Body overall. It has an incredibly creepy atmosphere, and as someone who grew up in the UK, it's actually quite refreshing to walk around a survival horror location that's full of UK-style low-income terraced houses, and even blocks of flats that have an almost brutalist architectural design to them. The visuals do a great job of recapturing that PlayStation 2 era look, which is again refreshing, as a lot of indie survival horror games, including powerhouses like Signalis and Crow Country, chase a more PS1 aesthetic. Where a lot of indie survival horror projects go after that old-school Resident Evil vibe though, this game is very clearly drawing its inspiration from Silent Hills 2 and 3, and trying to capture both the creepy atmosphere and overall playstyle of those two games. This means there's no limited inventory, viable melee combat, of a sort, environments that include claustrophobic interiors, and an outside location, and horror with a slightly more psychological emphasis. The story takes place in the not too distant future, where some years before, a city on the west coast of the UK was evacuated. Or rather, the wealthier members of this low-income area were extracted due to some kind of bioterrorism incident, and everyone else was left to get sick and die. The area was walled up and assaulted with orbital strikes to ensure that nothing was left alive there. The ruins of the city have become an exclusion zone, and while many would rather forget anything happened and move on with their lives in their new utopian megacity, there are those who left family and loved ones behind and who want to uncover the truth of what really happened there, that the real people responsible could be brought to justice, and also to ensure that a tragedy like this could never happen again. At the start of the game, we actually control a character named Sasha, who is working with one of these activist groups who are exploring near the city limits for evidence, and who, while searching for a lost member, stumbles into yeah, that's ominous. We pick up the trail about 12 days later, when we take control of Mika, a Leon Kennedy leather jacket wearing woman who's determined to breach the exclusion zone and find her partner. Unfortunately, and you have to listen very carefully here,
The root function termination is protective and will require an administrator.
yeah, by chance or possibly by design, her car is brought down, and we are progressing through this nightmare town on foot from here on out. I had one eye on this game for quite a while before its release, and it's a solo dev project, and judged as such, damn, this thing is impressive. But there is only so much that can be forgiven with the mantra, well, only one dude put this together, so what were you expecting? From the start, the visuals and the atmosphere just push all the right buttons in my brain to put me in that, yay, classic Silent Hill space. Our first major area of exploration is this long abandoned block of flats, and I love that every room we enter has a story. A tragic story, of course, a story of people running out of food, water, and hope, and ultimately, meeting a horrible and often lonely end here. None of the puzzles here are massive head scratchers, but the environment loops around on itself in a very satisfying way, and you get that little thrill of excitement when you find the key item to remove a certain obstruction and rush off back there to uncover whatever it was hiding. What's not so great is the combat, specifically the melee combat. The shooting is actually pretty solid, though there's only really a handgun, a shotgun, and a bow and arrows. The bow and arrow is the weak point here, and it really needed better sound effects to sell the impact of those arrows hitting their targets. A lot of people excuse the melee combat in games like this by saying, well, this is a desperate untrained woman, not some Imperial Space Marine. And while I agree with that, there is still a point at which we cross from a stylistic choice into an actual shortcoming. Like the bow and arrows, the melee weapons really lack in impact. The attack animations, sound effects, and enemy reactions just don't feel meaty or satisfying like it does in the games it's taking inspiration from, and it just has a clunky and unpolished feel to it. It's definitely not deal-breaking, and when the camera angles work in your favour, you can actually weave around your enemies' attacks as well, though I got hit with way too many cheap shots from downed enemies for my liking. That does, however, make stomping them out a lot more satisfying. While the opening area is a great survival horror location, most of what you do after is fairly linear. You run through some streets, have a bit of a psychedelic trip through the sewers, and finally head into a subway, all the while being harassed by this creepy voice on the other end of the landlines you use to save your progress. The game is overall on the short side. That's okay though, as this is a cheaper single dev project. The story is interesting. There's actually 2 endings to it, but I didn't really feel the need to do an entire second playthrough to see them both, and just watch the other one on YouTube. I like all the environmental storytelling the most, like picking up this shotgun in this church, and then realizing why it's here in the first place. And I basically understood what was going on by the end. I can definitely recommend this for the price. It's not a game that set any kind of new standard for indie survival horror games, but not every release needs to do that. It's just a, mostly, fun little game with a few interesting quirks, and given it's relatively cheap and isn't going to suck up weeks of your time, well, you can do much worse than this, that's for sure. So, on to the main event. Shinobi Art of Vengeance fucks. There simply isn't a better word in the English language to describe it. It is one of the most intense dopamine drips I've ever been put on, and while it can be absolutely brutal and frustrating at times, all of that effort pays off when you suddenly figure out exactly what the game wants you to do, and you find yourself almost flying through these absolutely beautifully rendered hand-drawn environments like some kind of whirlwind of death that doesn't even skip a step to assault enemies left, right, and center before bringing them all down with a single, powerful death blow. In short, this is a game that makes you feel like a ninja. Now, my channel has a bit of a history with ninjas, as I unironically think that Clair Entertainment's The Mark of the Ninja is a masterpiece, and consider Sekiro to be my favourite Souls game. Yeah, I'm one of those guys. Shinobi is also a series that's near and dear to my heart, as I was a Sega boy back in the 90s, and Golden Axe and The Revenge of Shinobi were 2 of the first games I had on my Mega Drive. I was never able to finish Revenge of Shinobi without the infinite shuriken cheat, as the OG is basically a side-scrolling shooter that substitutes guns and bullets for shuriken. But even with that, the game was absurdly brutal, and it took a combination of younger Arkham's willpower, focus, and lack of friends to go outside and spend time with to finally break Neo Zed and see that ending. Also, the UK Sonic the Comic had a gorgeously drawn Revenge of Shinobi comic strip that was one of my favourites, alongside the titular Sonic saga of course. Shinobi, like a lot of Sega classics, never really found its way in the early days of 3D games, and just like Streets of Rage, faded from existence, with only a couple of lackluster attempts being made at honest-to-goodness 3D versions that weren't all that well received. But now, here is Art of Vengeance, a real 2D side-scrolling light Metroidvania developed by the same studio that brought us the absolutely amazing Streets of Rage 4, and was clearly developed using the same rationale of make something very similar to the source material, but do it stylish as all hell. And that's exactly what we have here. We once again assume the role of Joe Musashi, the vengeful shinobi from the previous games. Violence has once again been brought to his front door, and now he's going to show our new nemesis Lord Ruse, his entourage of colourful boss enemies, and the entire army of fools who serve him exactly why that was a bad idea. About a week prior to Christmas, I downloaded the demo of this game and 100%ed it, and that's something I recommend you all go and do right now. So, while recording this first level at least, I got to look damn cool while doing so. You can no doubt see that rather than using shurikens all the way in this one, the majority of the combat is centered around Musashi's Shinobi Katana. This system has a simple light and heavy attack, and you can combo these two attacks together into your own deadly dance. As the game progresses, you'll quickly start adding new combinations to your arsenal from the yokai shop you encounter at various places around each map. So far, all of these have been very useful, and there's situational benefits to figuring out each one and knowing when to bust it out versus to just mashing the controller buttons all day. These all look cool, and we have to take a minute to just appreciate the sound effects being used on the impacts. Tell me that isn't satisfying. I dare you. Similar to Sekiro and Doom Eternal, there's an execution move that can be used on weakened opponents to both quickly end their meaningless existence and replenish our health in with the deal. And again, absurdly satisfying. Other features of the combat include an iframe dodge roll, enemy juggling and air attacks. We can still throw shuriken even if we don't have that many, and there's also a combo meter and amulets. Amulets do a variety of things, but some of their more useful features include things like increasing our damage if we can keep up a lengthy unbroken combo. Then there are Ninpo special attacks that are on a charge, and the mighty ninjutsu powers that can clear a room very quickly. While it can all feel a little desperate and knuckle-busting at the start, you'll develop a rhythm of using all these things and grow to understand your enemies and know the best attack patterns and abilities to bring to bear on each of them as they show up. This can feel overwhelming at times when you've got 3 different types of enemy on the screen and all the constant movement just turns into visual noise. But you'll little by little filter it all into something manageable, at which point you'll become a devastating bringer of death. But it's not only the combat that's amazing, because this game has incredible traversal. The right shoulder button on your controller is your dodge button, but it's also your vault and air dash button depending on the situation. And the levels are designed to make sure that you exploit and master all of Musashi's mobility options, in just the same way that it trains you to make the most of his combat options. In every level though, you're going to come across barriers that you can't pass through yet. This is where the light Metroidvania mechanics come into play. You'll find a collection of ninja tools on your journey that will allow you to finally overcome these barriers, and these incentivize you to revisit previous levels in order to plunder their secrets, take on hidden challenges, and gain more coins and tokens to upgrade the yokai store, and in turn Musashi, to make taking out these fools, who didn't read up on what happened to the last private military corporation, who tried to fuck with this guy and his dog, even more satisfying. The game has a few issues, namely those you'll find in a lot of precision platformers. A big one in all of these is failure states. You're either set back so little that failing may as well never have happened, or so far that you may as well simply restart the level to get all your health back. But even with that, and believe me, I am not a fan of precision platformers at all, this game just keeps calling me back, and at the time of writing, I've invested most of the last couple of days into playing it. And did I mention just how beautiful it looks? I mean, damn. In any other year, I'd say this is the most gorgeous game of the year. But not this year, I'm afraid. In animation, they say that every frame is a painting. Each second of an animation is made up of 26 to 30 masterpieces that flip by far too fast for you to appreciate a single one of them. It's very clear that the team at Sandfall read that memo when they started work on Clair Obscure Expedition 33. Because, oh my god, this thing is jaw-droppingly gorgeous. Seriously, just stop moving at any moment, point your camera in any direction, hell, you could even point it at the ground, and you'll be met with one of the most beautiful games you've ever seen. I knew from the trailers that Clair Obscure was very likely going to be a Christmas game for me, and most likely a personal game of the year, though I am a little torn at the moment. But I mean, look at all these green flags. A French studio, made up of former Ubisoft devs, who wanted to escape the AAA slot factory method of development this publisher pushes, who created a passion project on a smaller budget that turned out to be some kind of fever dream of what happens when you take games like Persona, Okami, Final Fantasy, and I can't even begin to imagine what else, throw them into the heart of a star, and let them get compressed together until they transform into something far greater than the sum of their parts. That then goes on to be universally praised by critics and players, sells millions of copies, and shows that once again, the only thing AAA publishers need to do in order to make great games and a profit is just let their developers cook. They need to stop chasing trends, live service trash, and the myth of infinite revenue, and they need to stop telling gamers that actually, yes, this is what we want. And on top of that, it's basically a JRPG that I can confidently recommend to the Summer of Mark, and might actually, one day, get him to try Persona. I mean, it probably won't, but a man can dream. I can at this point only give my first impressions because this is a multi-hour RPG, and a big chunk of the opening is just the tutorial area. So right now, I only have a limited view of the game's mechanics, and about as much knowledge of the story as anyone who's watched a trailer. But I can say that so far, Expedition 33 has both met and exceeded every one of my expectations. The story is beautiful and heartbreaking, even in the opening hours. This is in no small part because the cast is absolutely killing it with both their voice acting and facial capture, and truly selling these characters to me, making them both endearing and believable, and making me instantly invested in their struggles. Oh, and did I mention this game is absolutely gorgeous? Well, I also haven't come across any performance issues either, which just goes to show the problem isn't Unreal, it's the people using it, and very likely their working conditions too. But as beautiful as this game is to look at, it's not exactly a walking simulator, so we should at least talk a little about how it plays. It would be easy to look at the combat and say, this is all just kinda derivative. It's just Persona, with some QTEs from Lost Odyssey, and some parry mechanics thrown in to mix things up. But that would be very reductive indeed. This clearly isn't a case of devs just wanting to randomly add their favourite features from different RPGs together and hope it'll work. All of these things have been given careful consideration and attention, and all the systems work together to transform the combat into an affair that is once tactical and heart-pounding. So yeah, you've got that stylish radial menu where the actions are mapped to buttons rather than having to scroll through menus to get to the command you want. You choose your action, then your target, and the animation plays. Depending on the attack, you might get to do a QTE to boost the output of the ability. Enemies hit like trucks and have elemental weaknesses, as well as physical weak points that can be targeted with firearms. Your goal is to end battles as swiftly as possible because if it comes down to a war of attrition, you aren't going to be coming out on top. However, it's the parry mechanic that really transforms these battles into heart-pounding action set pieces. I was actually a little worried that this was going to be too much for me, that my RPG brain would see this as a gimmick and one that detracts from the rest of the combat, but nuh-uh. The part of me that loves Sekiro, Sifu, and Metal Gear Rising is all in on this. I absolutely love how it works. Enemy attacks have enough visual and audio cues that after the first couple of rounds, it very quickly becomes your fault that you aren't reacting in time, and pulling off the dodges, parries, and counters is absurdly satisfying. I'm still nowhere near perfect yet, but I snatched victory from the jaws of defeat on the first boss when, after Gustav had been KO'd, I suddenly tuned into the audio cues for the boss's attacks and perfect parried and countered my way to victory. And since it's become something of a theme for this video, just listen to these sound effects and tell me they don't make your heart pound in time to them. Oh, and the music? That is just the chef's kiss on top of it all. Short of the game overstaying its welcome or becoming a drag later on, there will probably be a full Clair Obscure video up on this channel at some point in the future. For now at least, I am very happy to say that this game was well worth the wait. Which just leaves Resident Evil 2. Specifically, the GOG release. I mean, what can I say really? It's Resident Evil 2. It's one of the greatest video games ever made. While I would recommend the remake to anyone coming into this series for the first time, this one is my GOAT. If you're one of the very few people who saw my Resident Evil 2 review, which was the second video I uploaded after deciding to do this with the channel about 5 years ago now, well, You may recall me saying that the remake was my favourite version of the game, and while I do replay RE2 Remake at least once a year, that statement has not withstood the test of time. So it may surprise you to discover that I was actually a little disappointed with this one. I know, right? What the hell? Well, ignoring that there are actually some issues with the pre-rendered cutscenes not playing correctly sometimes, I didn't quite get the same nostalgia buzz from this game that I got from Project Eden and Gun because, well, I still play this game via emulator fairly regularly. So while it's great to have these three available as a one-click download, please do the same for Code Veronica, it just didn't hit me in the feels quite the way I wanted it to. But don't worry, dear viewer, because this story does have a surprise Christmas ending. You see, I awoke on the morning of the 25th to a notification from the Steam app telling me that one of my Discord friends had sent me a gift. Specifically, my favourite Baldur's Gate game.
Drawn by a haunting voice, you come to the Elf Song Tavern. It is a small place, filled with a motley assortment of patrons and grisly trophies.
Oh god, the music. Those water effects. The jiggle physics. I just wish Drizzt was unlocked from the outset, but oh god, this is just a thing of beauty. I've had this on my wishlist for a while now, and two things have kept me from buying it. One is the price. I mean, $40 for a PlayStation 2 game? Are you out of your damn mind? On top of that, this is one of my favourite couch co-op games, but this version didn't include any kind of online multiplayer setup. At least not if you buy it on GOG. You can, however, invite someone to a game if you're playing it on Steam. So if the price ever got low enough, I was all in for that. As you can see, it's an isometric ARPG from the PS2 days, and it is fun as all hell. At the start of the game, you can choose from a human arcane archer, dwarven fighter, and elven sorceress, with a fourth character available after you finish the main game, and the Gauntlet's secret dungeon. You run around and smash everything living and not living, gain XP, level up, buy powers, upgrade your equipment, all so you can fight stronger enemies in more dangerous dungeons, and so on, right through to the end game. It sounds so simple on paper, but the whole experience is greater than the sum of its parts, and it's just so fun to run around smashing up everything. You will feel very vulnerable at the start of the game when you only have a dagger and a shirt to protect you from the inhabitants of the entire D&D monster manual. And of course, your first mission will be to kill a bunch of rats. But little by little, you'll turn yourself into an unstoppable powerhouse that rips through enemy hordes like a hot knife through butter, making those later levels especially satisfying when all your hard work really starts paying off. I think the X factor here though is just the game's overall atmosphere. The Elf Song Tavern, for example, feels very cozy. The voice of the narrator is so captivating, and actually, all the voice actors are putting in the work to earn their money here. Though I will say the guy who runs the shop really needs to shut up and let me pick out what I want.
Swords, axes, bows, we have everything you need right here. If you need something to split someone's skull, or a helm to protect your own, you'll come to the right place.
If there's one issue playing a game like this with a pad rather than a mouse, it's getting your character to face the right direction when attacking. With a mouse, you just click on the enemy you want to smash, and you just smash away with whatever weapon you have equipped. But you can easily get turned around in this game, and find yourself swinging at thin air, or firing your arrows at brick walls. It takes some getting used to, but it isn't really deal-breaking by any stretch of the imagination. Anyway, this was a happy reunion for me and this game, and one of my friends over here cannot wait to get a co-op session on. If I ever get gifted the second game, I'll probably do them both in a single video. It's a real shame that the series didn't continue on after the second game, and there's quite a bit of drama concerning the Snowblind engine that this game was built in. It could be a good chat one day. Anyway, that was my Christmas for 2025. I also cooked myself a first-class roast pork lunch, watched Wake Up Dead Man, which I did enjoy, and it's great to see Daniel Craig having way too much fun doing his job, but they haven't managed to quite catch the lightning in a bottle with the sequels like they did with the original Knives Out. Since I've got Netflix for the rest of the month, I'm finally going to watch K-Pop Demon Hunters, and maybe rewatch the first season of Altered Carbon again. So, thanks for stopping by anyway. Let me know what you got for Christmas down in the comments, and I'll see you hopefully in January for my full analysis of one of the greatest RPGs ever made, Dragon Age Origins. Happy New Year, everyone.